You're watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.
All right, welcome to The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report. I'm your host, Simon-Cherin Gordon. We're starting a good, half hour late, guys. Is that where we are? This game could have been over in regulation, but a questionable call, and then an overtime period, and then what seemed like another overtime period worth of reviews and ejections over the last 2 seconds. We're finally here. It's 11:45 on the East Coast. I'm joined by Josh Cornelissen, Corban Ford, and TJ Burns. Guys, welcome to the show. Let's get right into this. We were going to lead with the Kevin Durant charge change to block. Do you guys still want to start there, and then we can hash out this weird? I don't really know. I think a lot of us had our sound off, but what happened at the end here? Where do you guys want to start with this wild ending?
Yes, we can take that charge call. Sounds like a place to go. We can go chronologically.
Yeah. So Durant driving the lane. I don't know exactly how much time was on the clock. I think a little over 30 seconds.
34 seconds.
Yeah.
34 seconds. LeBron comes over to help. He's moving, but it looks like first of all, he's out of the restricted area. And it looks like he at least had a case for being in legal guarding position. So they call a charge on the floor. Then they go review it. And the rule is you are allowed to change that to a block. Some of us were talking pre-show about, I don't think you changed that call there. And then there's the question of, was that the right call? So I want to start with Josh on this. Josh, based on those two arguments, first of all, was it the right call? And secondly, do you make that change even if it was right there?
I think the bang bang call, I think it does apply because on the one hand, LeBron was there ahead of time. Like he saw where Durant was going, he got in that space and Durant ran into him. However, LeBron was also moving. He was sliding to the side. His momentum honestly carried him past Durant by the time they actually contacted. So where LeBron started, he actually was knocked in the other direction when the contact hit because he had slid all the way past Durant's kind of path of motion there. So I think you could easily call it either way. But and I'm saying this as a Warriors fan, I don't think you can go back and change that call. I don't think that's a good look. I don't think that's really fair to what happens on the court because charge calls are always like 50-50. At the most, they're like 53-47 because they're just so close. And for you to have referees getting on it, with the headsets and they're talking to Secaucus and they're looking, in slow motion to try to change and have the power to change that call, I don't think that works. I think you trust the refs to make the best call in the situation and you just move on. Yeah,
I mean, another Warriors fan, right? He's with you. I can't imagine where our two LBJ guys land on this. Guys, what's your take?
I'm going to do a TJ special and say that I think TJ should go first.
So this is something where I have a lot of inner conflict. I am a stickler for rules, and the refs followed the rules a little ticky-tacky. I don't know how much of that feeling is my LBJ bias, but I mean, the right call is the right call is the right call, and I do think it was a blocking foul on LeBron. No matter how close it is, it doesn't matter. It's them's the rules.
Yeah, I want to get into the meat of this game. Corban, do you have anything else on this call, or should we talk about what transpired after that?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much. I would have preferred it been a charge, obviously, but his foot was sliding. I could see why.
Yeah, so Durant goes to the line, knocks down. Cleveland goes down and scores again. Warriors get the ball back, and Steph Curry gets an and one. Warriors up one. George Hill goes to the line with about 4.7 left, I believe. We can get our stats boy on that. Alex West, by the way, with us, producer / Tony Reale of the show. Yeah, Hill goes to the line, splits a pair, and then I think this is like right up there with the call, one of the wildest moments of this game. J.R. Smith, Corban actually with the lip-reading catch sees J.R. in overtime explaining himself, saying that he thought the Cavs were winning the game. He just takes the ball out up towards midcourt, And by the time he realizes and tries to pass it, it was too late. So that's what led us to overtime. And then much like we saw in 2015, game one of the first Warriors-Cavs series, Warriors escaped regulation, and then there was just an avalanche to open the extra period.
I still don't even understand what the avalanche was about. I get that Cavs are out of gas. LeBron was just spent, and you can see missed shots and everything, but you can see the frustration starting to build. I just didn't know it'd come off at the end as it did. I mean, it was actually LeBron and Steph Curry who kind of started with their little back and forth, but geez, now we might have suspensions. I don't even know, man. That was something.
Well, JR and you more often than not die by JR, and we got the rich and full tapestry that is JR Smith tonight. He played some pretty competent defense at times, but man, there's probably nothing more JR Smith than running backwards down the court when the game's tied
and thinking they were up. I mean, recognition, situational. Game one, I don't even know how you even say that. Even if you did think that you were up by one, I would never say that out loud. I would just go, "Oh, my bad," and in my head, dang, I thought I was up.
Alex,
imagine turning around to LeBron and saying that and thinking it would turn out okay.
Yeah, probably a bad call. Alex, do you have JR's?
I'll get it for you, Simon. Hold on.
All right. I mean, I agree with TJ. I think JR had a good game. Where do you got? What kind of series do the Cavs need from JR Smith? Obviously, he was huge in 2016, especially in those final in the games in Cleveland and then in Game 7. Do they need that kind of JR performance again? I mean, obviously they need a lot of performances, but would you guys put JR up there as like one of the biggest X factors in the series?
I got your line here, Simon. He was 10 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, 1 personal foul, -20 for the game.
I think a competent shooting guard is the X factor for the Cavs. I don't know if it's necessarily. I would give Rodney Hood a shot at this point. He's been in basketball purgatory over the last 4 seconds just now. Why on earth him? Because J.R. Smith is playing. He played, as you said, competent defense. But come on, late game errors like that. Not bringing the exact shooting. Got rimmed out of a couple of shots that could have went down, but it wasn't like he was lighting the net on fire, as you could tell by his 10 points.
Yeah, they went to some post-ups early with trying to post, which was a strange strategy. Josh, are you buying the Cleveland going another route here? Rodney Hood, are you a Jordan Clarkson guy?
No, I'm not a Jordan. I don't think anyone should be outside of Mrs. Clarkson, but I think J.R. Smith has to be the answer. His ability to get hot is really important. He's going to take advantage of the Warriors flying around and leaving him open. But I think he's also pitched in strange little ways. We're all mad at J.R. Smith for, what he, well, not we, but NBA fans are probably mad at him for not making a good play, giving LeBron a chance to win the game there at the end by thinking they were up. But it was after he got an offensive rebound, which was his 3rd of the game. He was fighting. He was really fighting. You saw the same thing in Game 7 against the Celtics. So I think J.R. Smith, when he's locked in and playing well, can really help this team, and I don't think there's anyone else who is able to step up. Rodney Hood has just not been able to find any traction in Cleveland. Jordan Clarkson is absolutely not the answer. Jose Calderon cannot see the floor against this team, so it's got to be JR. Whatever that means, however much ugly is lumped in there with the good, the only way the Cavaliers come back to win this series involves J.R. Smith being very, very good.
Yeah, I'm going to leave the only Jordan Clarkson guy is Mrs. Clarkson comment for what it is. Not going to touch that one. We can't go any longer, though, without talking about what LeBron James did tonight. And I want to go to TJ on this. I mean, he played more than well enough to steal a game on the road here. He played one of his best finals games he's ever played. He set a career high, scoring, what was it? What did he end with, 50? Was it an even 50? 51. Just a ridiculous performance. This is a level we didn't even see from James last year, even though you could have certainly argued he was the best player on the floor last year. First of all, is this sustainable? Can he keep giving performances like this, or was this him, emptying the tank, trying to steal one, and now that they didn't steal it, is that a concern? And B, if this is sustainable, does this change Cleveland's chances of actually competing in the series?
I mean, so you're LeBron getting into a bad mood, and when he starts throwing those really hard passes into people's chest, and it's my dog has very strong feelings about this as well. But I don't feel as if I feel like it's inevitable that you're going to start seeing those passes being thrown by LeBron. It just doesn't look good. I mean, if they were going to win a game, it was going to be this one. And
TJ, what's your dog's name?
Zola.
Ask Zola why Zola, is it a he, she?
She.
Why is she saying that LeBron is heading to Philly right now? This isn't the time. We're going to talk about Philly later. Tell Zola to keep those thoughts for after the series, all right?
Oh man, Steve Kerr at the podium, he basically just totally trolled JR, but like said, oh, we got lucky. JR took the ball, and I guess he thought they were ahead. Like the way he said it, man, I'm dead. I'm sorry. Goodness.
Yeah. So I mean, Corban, I want to get your thoughts on LBJ's night. I mean, what do you think? Is he going to be able to channel this again? Is he going to get frustrated, like TJ alluded to, and like, is there a point where he might check out of this series? It seems like he is just almost at the point. I don't know. I personally feel like he might kind of be past that point where he's like, I'm going to go down fighting. My reputation is bulletproof now. It doesn't seem quite as bitter as he was like in his final Miami days or his final Cleveland days the first time. What do you think, Corban? What does LBJ have in store the rest of the series?
Personally, I think he put a lot of energy in this one. I think he'll come out with the same game attitude and, just trying to leave the example on the floor. But honestly, with the load that he had to carry tonight, and if he has to even have this increase, I think it's going to be more of that overtime period where he's going to get his shots up, but he's going to be waiting long to the shot clock to get the mismatches. He may not get those mismatches. He's going to go drive down the lane. He may not get the call, and he'll check out, and not check out in a way of, oh, I'm out of the game, but just little moments where he was mad efficient. I think at one point he was 11 for 13 midway through the third. His jump shot was on. When his jump shot's on, you can't grade LeBron because it's hard to stop him with that's happening. But I could see him getting tired, the legs being out of him. If the legs are gone, the jump shot comes and goes. And if that's going, he needs to try so much harder on the offensive end. And so I could see this. I mean, obviously not going to score 51 again, although who knows. But I do see over the course of the series, not his effort waning, but he's just going to run out of gas. It's inevitable. He's had 8 40-point games this postseason alone. The first 51 he's had this postseason. He has a monster's load on the offensive end. He's not getting any favors in the defensive end. I do think that, he'll be willing, but, the body's going to be weak on this one.
Yeah, so I want to talk game 2 in a minute here, but let's give a Golden State a couple minutes. They did win this game. Granted, given some of the things that transpired, hard to really be pleased with their night. Josh, what are your thoughts on how Golden State played? Is there anything you want to praise them for? Anything you want to criticize them for? How do you feel about their game 1 effort?
Well, I think we all have to acknowledge the experience that took place in this game. He hasn't played for like 3 series. They dust him off. He comes in. He honestly gave them good minutes, even if it did end up in the worst dunk attempt I've seen since Klay Thompson visited China. So I think that we've got to acknowledge it. JaVale McGee gave them real energy. Like the Warriors, this Warriors team has always been excited to get out there on offense with JaVale, and that you could see that here. They were, trying to get him the ball. They were trying to get him open dunks. They really enjoyed playing with him. And honestly, defensively, I thought he was fine. And what that is showing me is that you had Kevon Looney putting in some good defensive minutes. I still don't think he's the right choice to start at center. I do think it's Jordan Bell, but Looney didn't get eaten alive. I thought Jordan Bell was excellent in a lot of ways. He still has the occasional lapses. I mean, he's a rookie, but his passes were incredible. I mean, there were some beautiful assists. That give and go cut where Durant was just wide open to the rim, I thought was wonderful. I thought he had a great pass around the rim for another dunk. So I think when you have JaVale McGee able to get out there, play a few minutes, you've got Kevon Looney not dying, you've got Jordan Bell who could still, I think, play more minutes, and then obviously Draymond at center. That just allows the Warriors more flexibility, which is really important because they don't have a lot of wing depth, especially with Iguodala out. And so the success they found rotating through a few different centers, I think, has to give them confidence that they have a lot of different forms series.
I think that's a great point, Josh. I mean, I think one of my main takeaways is just that their centers are so much more playable than they were against Houston. All three guys you mentioned had probably, I mean, McGee played, and then the other two guys looked better than they did pretty much at any point in that Houston series. I agree Bell is the best option. LeBron seems to kind of think that all the Warriors centers are Festus Ezeli, and none of them are. They're doing a better job kind of hanging with him on the perimeter, contesting his shot. So he's going to have to maybe change up his approach rather than just kind of try to go at those guys and shoot over them.
All right, guys, what's there to change up? He scored 51 points.
I was going to say, it's not like they're that much better than Festus Ezeli.
Yeah, but I mean, how much of LeBron's 51 came against like switches? I don't know if Alex has like the synergy up right now, but in terms of his night, I don't think he found his biggest success kind of attacking Golden State's five. I could be wrong on that. I'd want to get some numbers on that. What I saw was him more overpowering smaller guys. The play that stands out to me the most is when he just took Livingston off the dribble and kind of dunked all over him. Curry didn't really have that much success guarding him in this one. Klay Thompson had some trouble switched onto him. I don't know how much of James' success I would attribute to that.
Durant caught some in the face on his jumper, but
yeah.
No. Yeah, I get you. I think most of it I attribute to, and when that, like I said, when that jump shot's going, then you can't on switches, even if they're not, as you said, Festus Ezeli in the movement that the centers are and keeping up with LeBron. I don't think it's that much of a struggle. Like if Festus was a 2 out of 10 on defending him, I'd give them a 5. Like he still has a definite advantage in my opinion. But I agree with you in that maybe he was just on tonight. It wasn't like he found something that was something you'd use for game 2 to attack them again. It was just, and when that happens, you just do what the Warriors did. Keep playing, hope for the best, and wait for, the Cavs to do what they do outside LeBron.
Yeah, guys. So let's move on to 2 here. I alluded to game 1 of 2015 earlier, game that Cleveland almost stole and Golden State won in overtime. And people thought the Warriors would roll in game 2. Cleveland actually stole that game, even though Kyrie Irving got hurt at the end of regulation in game 1. That's kind of the feeling I have again now, that the adjustments, even though Golden State won, are going to come more from Golden State because they were the team that underperformed more than Cleveland. But either way, give me your adjustments here for either team in game 2. We'll start with Josh on this.
Cleveland probably has to look at what happened and think that if LeBron is going to be taking the vast majority of the shots, maybe they shift a little bit towards a little more defense on the court. So maybe, I don't know how that looks. I don't know if they view Nance as a positive defensive player or not. He brings energy, but perhaps not, sound fundamentals. I think that Korver kind of has a limited role anyway, but I think you get Jordan Clarkson just completely out of there. I think that George Hill only played 30 minutes. Even with the game going to overtime, I think you probably have to shift more minutes to him and less away from a guy like Clarkson, or maybe, Korver gives him so much juice, but just defensively, I think the Warriors kind of hounded him. But he had, him and Clarkson had great plus minuses. So maybe I don't even know what I'm talking about, but that's the feeling I think that they need to do is get a little more defense on the court, because I think that if LeBron James can sustain the level of play he has, you're going to run things through him. And if you look at that 2015 finals as somewhat of a blueprint, it was defense around LeBron. And so I think that's probably where the Cavaliers need to go, because if they try to just outscore the Warriors, they're probably going to fall flat again.
I would say, short of at the hotel, this was as good as they could have ever hoped for. They survived the Warriors shooting 51%. I don't know how it gets better. just like Josh was saying, it's not like you can have Kyle Korver out there. God knows you're not going to see a Jose Calderon, City Osman. I want to see Kendrick Perkins out there because I want to see him fight somebody. But otherwise, this is probably the best the Cavs could have hoped for. And they just want to get games close at the end, and hopefully LeBron does his superhero thing. That's probably the best chance for them to win a single game, much less a series.
I would just say that take his minutes for rest, that the Cavs do a better job of making sure that George Hill is out there. Obviously, foul trouble was definitely a situation in this one, a significant factor. But having Jordan Clarkson be the primary ball handler and have that being his priority when LeBron's off the court, it just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It doesn't work. He's going to take a horrible shot. His, floor seeing ability is just not there other than the most basic pass. It almost reminds me of Jamal Crawford. Actually, that's disrespectful to Jamal Crawford, but in the sense that he's going to shoot, but it's not exactly going to be a great shot. It's most likely going to be an ineffective one, an inefficient one.
Sorry, Corbin, I just want to cut in for a second and say that the Cavs were +3 without LeBron on the court tonight.
What?
Granted, in a small sample size, they were +3 without him. So something to chew over.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna stick to my guns though. But wow, that I did not see that happening.
Yeah, so I think my takeaway for Game 2 is a lot less. I think Cleveland is better with LeBron off the court, and if Cleveland wants to steal a game, that's the route they're going to have to go. No, yeah, guys. So Game 2 going to be a lot more to talk about. Obviously, as the series goes on, next time we're back here, we'll be 3 games in. What is your prediction before we move on to this Colangelo story?
I want to add. I want to just cut in real quick. There's a question we got on Twitter, and I think it's really interesting. Somebody asked, "Did Tristan Thompson buy himself a suspension?" So that's a question that I think warrants talking about. I mean, obviously we talked about what went on at the end of the game there, but I think it warrants talking about to see what's going to become of him. I mean, did it look that bad to you guys? Was it something that really didn't look that bad, kind of blown out of proportion late in a game, hotly contested, or was it something that you think the league's going to take a look at?
I don't think it was that big a deal. I think, and so the refs were a little sensitive at the end, and I think that Thompson was frustrated at maybe Livingston for taking the shot, maybe his teammates for not defending, and so he came out hard. But I mean, he would not have even contacted Livingston, even if he'd kept coming, because of the way he was turning his arm, he was going to contest. I think he was angry, but I don't think he was turning violent there. So I don't see any way that he's held out of any amount of Game 2.
Anyone else have anything else on this? I like the refs trying to, not base it on the outcome, but base it on the action. I don't see any way you can suspend him when there was no contact made. It's not like he took a full-on swing at someone.
But was it a swing? I think the ball, and then the ball slipped out of his hand. The hand it looked bad, it looked worse. No, but in real talk, it's probably going to be looked at. And also, I was looking at Twitter, and they said that as he was being led off the court, he apparently was motioning for Draymond Green to meet him outside, which means that you were not leaving in a timely manner, which is a rule. So I see it high likely that he's going to be suspended for Game 2. Just from that instance. Like, okay, you have a suspect punch, but then you want to carry it outside of the locker room. We'll see. But the way that the rules have been going on, I don't even know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Corbin. I wasn't aware of that extracurricular activity, should we say. I hope he doesn't get suspended, because it'll be a better Game 2 if he doesn't. Thompson, not a great night, but certainly important for Cleveland on the glass, just boxing out even when he's not getting the boards. So, guys, let's move on. Alex, is there anything else from the Twitter, or should we move on?
No, that's it for right now. I will keep you abreast of the situation as it develops.
Yeah, Alex, just bumping up his production duties by the show. Really great stuff from our behind the scenes MVP here. But we got to move on to this Colangelo story. If right now you probably know pretty much all about it, but does anyone want to just briefly break down what we know and what we don't know right now?
Sure. So what happened is on the 29th, a couple days ago, Ben Dietrich of The Ringer and dropped a piece. Basically, he had done investigative journalism into 5 Twitter accounts that seemed to all be connected in various ways to Brian Colangelo, the 76ers general manager. These accounts ranged from one account that just followed some media NBA-related people but never tweeted, to one, Eric Jr., that tweeted all the time. And I think what's significant here is that not that someone has burner accounts. Everybody's got burner accounts. Ask Kevin Durant. But what's important is that these burner accounts are, one, like defending Brian Colangelo, which, okay, whatever, and stumping for Joel Embiid for All-Star votes. That's fine. Wait, and also releasing like private information about 76ers players and trying to encourage media members to ask like probing questions about stuff that's being covered up by the Sixers, and revealing information about trade talks and all this like proprietary information that no one outside the organization should know or did know. And yet you have these Twitter accounts that are tweeting about it. And I think that a lot of the evidence seems to suggest that either Brian Colangelo or someone very close to him was involved with these accounts.
Yeah, so it's certainly murky right now, and I wanted to go to TJ on this because TJ about the journalistic ethics of this. Obviously, it's extremely damning if true. But TJ, what were your thoughts on the Ringer story and kind of where this stands from a journalism perspective?
Well, if it's true, it's equally damning on the Ringer if it's false, if they chose to run this story. This is probably the Ringer's first major piece of investigative journalism. They're relatively new, only been running for a couple of years now. And so their story is based on a single source and then some sleuthing, Twitter sleuthing. It kind of reminded me of Ashley Feinberg finding James Comey's Twitter account. So the main issue is that as of now, the Ringer is the only outlet that corroborates this story. We're not seeing reporting from ESPN or Sports Illustrated or Yahoo Sports or anywhere like that agreeing or saying they found anything similar. One thing to note about that is that you would imagine that ESPN probably has more in-tune sources. Woj was tweeting about it, and as if this was nothing he had ever heard of. It's a little strange for a source to only go to one outlet with this sort of thing to try and run it. Maybe maybe that source did go to other places and try, and ESPN or anywhere else didn't see that it had any merit, and the Ringer just took a shot on it. So it's possible, and the circumstantial evidence is pretty damning. But as with any news story, this is just a little, tip on reading news. If you're only seeing one outlet reporting it, treat with a fair amount of skepticism.
Yeah, and it's strangely reminiscent of Dr. V's magical putter story. I don't know how many out there remember that, but certainly a controversial thing. Now it's unfair to just say, oh, because Bill Simmons was the editor-in-chief at both sites, they don't have credibility. Maybe it is fair to say that, but you'd also think they'd be extremely careful. How bad of a look that was, or certainly how controversial it was. Let's say, though, and this is going to be fascinating to watch unfold in terms of our other outlets going to come out with corroborating reports. Let's say it does turn out to be true, as we all seem to agree that evidence is damning. first of all, is there any way Brian Colangelo keeps his job? And I think more interestingly than that, how does this affect the Sixers this summer and long term, even if Colangelo is fired on the spot?
So I think that it's very or someone very close to him was behind this. I think a popular theory right now is that his wife was behind the Eric Jr. account. But the problem is that it's going to be very difficult to either prove it was Colangelo or prove it wasn't. And so the 76ers have launched their own like independent investigation, but that's unlikely to finish in the next week or two. That's probably going to take a couple of months. And that extends right past the draft and right past free agency. So I think the implications for the organization are massive. Because do you let Colangelo kind of serve as a lame duck general manager with this hanging over his head going into the draft? With like that's significant. They have a lottery pick with pick number 10. They're going to be adding a young piece that's going to be presumably a part of this core for the next 5 to 8 years. And then free agency when they're going to have max cap space and they're going to try to sit down with guys like LeBron James and Paul George and convince them to come to Philadelphia. Can Brian be in those rooms having those conversations? If LeBron going to talk to Brian Colangelo if he's afraid that a burner account run by Colangelo could be talking about him and revealing private information about those conversations? LeBron's not going to have any of that, and so you have to wonder how much that would damage it. So then do they suspend Colangelo? Well, is that fair to him if this isn't true, and if they do believe that's not true? And if they suspend him, then do they bring in outside counsel? Do they just let the assistant GM, who I don't have his name pulled up, but I know that he is from the scouting side and does not have much experience kind of running things. This is a huge summer, and they probably needed a guy better than Colangelo to run it, but they at least needed a guy like Colangelo to run this summer. And now they may not have that. And I think that that's going to have huge shockwaves through the organization. Things were so bright just a couple of weeks ago, and then they crash out of the playoffs, and now this, and things are starting to get a little bit more smoky.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to back at this point, right? And if it's not true, that's really too bad. But I mean, if they can't disprove it, like you said, how do you rebuild that trust with Markelle Fultz? How do you rebuild that trust with Joel Embiid? Going to be very difficult. It's really a shame if some erroneous report is going to cost him his job, but we'll see how this unfolds. What about Sam Hinkie though? I mean, is this a blessing in disguise, guys? Is Hinkie coming back to the city of brotherly love here? I mean, did the Sixers actually?
I know Alex is a producer, but I want to tag him in. Oh my God!
All right, Alex, let's hear your thoughts on this.
First of all, Sam Hinkie. One of the first things that people talked about was like, what if it's Sam Hinkie? What if he's behind the scenes? Sam Hinkie had nothing to do with this. 0% chance that Sam Hinkie had anything to do with this. What I find interesting about this whole story, and sort of just to take this a little bit of a different direction from what you tagged me in for, TJ, is I'm a little bit suspicious on the timing. And you actually touched on it early when you said that it was interesting that, sort of the Celtics, Homer, Bill Simmons, guy who's purported himself as the sports fan, as the Boston sports fan, and, that's his whole website, waits until this moment sort of in the abyss, sort of waiting between the start of the finals and very early on into the draft process, free agency, whatever, to drop this bombshell on what is probably Boston's biggest rival for the next 4 to 5 years in terms of young teams with a lot of talent. He held this apparently, that this story came to them in January. They could have reported it on January. They could have reported about it over the All-Star break in the playoffs, but none of those things happened, and they sort of waited until a moment where A, they have the spotlight, which you get from a journalistic point of view because you want clicks, but then B, they waited until a moment where Philadelphia was sort of on the rise. It was a team that people were talking about to sort of drop this bombshell. And I find that interesting just on a number of levels because Bill Simmons, in any regard, has just sort of put himself out there as an unrequited Boston sports fan. And this certainly works in their favor. Now, Chris Ryan, the head editor for The Ringer, is a Sixers fan, so maybe there was a little bit of balance there. But I just find the timing interesting. I find the story to be a little less interesting. I mean, whatever, it's Twitter scandals. It feels like we have one of these every other day. But the timing of it is really the part of it that just sort of sticks out to me as, was this a premeditated, I don't want to say attack, I don't want to, but was it premeditated to sort of wait until this moment to grab leverage for a team that is going into the future as probably one of the Eastern Conference favorites with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid?
Anyone else have anything else on this story? I mean, I think we could talk about this all night. I want to get to talking about the Houston and Boston offseasons. By the way, Alex, while you took on a role of being a panelist, I covered you as producer, and I can confirm that this stream is still up and running. So handling
you,
my duties.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Really tough work. Yeah. We're interchangeable. We switch a lot.
We're switching defense. That's what we do. You just sort of switch and cover over each other. So that's how we got to keep things going around here.
That's right. All right, get back to monitoring the boards and get off the air.
I'm seeing on the Twitter sphere, Thompson. Now this is just what Twitter's saying, lip readers, but they're saying that Tristan Thompson called one of the Golden State Warriors assistant coaches a homophobic slur that starts with an F, which kind of started the fracas there.
So, I mean, do you think that could factor into the suspension?
If that's corroborated, it could, as a culmination. I mean, all the little things individually, but I mean, he did show his ass out there a little bit, and he might deserve it.
And just to jump in, I think if that was the case, they've been very serious about things like like homophobic slurs and things like that. And it's especially impactful if it was directed at Warriors assistant coach, because Jaren Collins' brother was the first NBA player to come out as gay, and so I think that connection could be really impactful. So if that is true, which obviously it needs to be corroborated by more than Twitter, but I think that could be huge. And without Tristan Thompson, I think that the Cavaliers will lose one of kind of their real leverage points in the series.
Yeah, and there's really it just that we're kind of talking about here on the show. It gets he seems like he was kind of out of control at the end of the game. His emotions got the best of him. It's harder to defend any of the individual actions when they're all put together, and that one probably being the most serious of them all, although you certainly don't want anyone elbowing anyone in the face. But guys, let's talk about the game sevens that ended since our last. We haven't talked about what was one of the best conference finals we've had in recent memory. Two home teams losing game sevens, the Boston Celtics and Houston Rockets, behind, I don't know if I would say historically bad three-point shooting, but certainly historically bad at that kind of volume in a high leverage moment like that. And now I want to look ahead kind of to these off seasons. We can share some thoughts on those game sevens first if we want. Do you guys have anything on Boston or Houston in their game sevens, or should we get right into these kind of off season previews?
Can I interrupt the breaking news again?
Yeah.
Woj dropped on ESPN that the 76ers are considering firing Colangelo. That the probe hasn't been completed, but it's pretty much looking toward that they're going to drop Colangelo. It was mostly for that whole disclosing the failed physical by Jahlil Okafor, that privileged information.
Yeah, so I'm sure this is exciting news. Reading Zach Lowe, and they report that ownership fears that Colangelo's credibility inside and outside the organization may be too badly damaged to continue in the job, and that later they say that Colangelo has told close associates he believes he knows who is responsible for the tweets, but has insisted to those in the organization and to the media that he had nothing to do with them.
This is getting crazy. Wow. I mean, I guess this is going to be awesome to watch unfold over the next few days. Might end up being more interesting than these finals. But yes, to be continued. Keep bringing those updates if they pour in. I want to get to these game sevens though. I think we can start in the West. I mean, do you guys have, first of all, if we're going to talk about Houston's offseason, we have to talk about the game 7 and the series, the Chris Paul injury, that stuff. The refs. So this was a heated debate in the 94 Feet Report Slack. So yeah, Corban, have at it. With the refs, better refereeing crew, would we be talking about a Rockets Cavs game 1 right now?
Okay, so if you'd asked me this as late as 5 hours after the game, I would have said it. Hell yes, we would have had a different one, this and that. But I've rewatched the game and I've thought about it a little bit more. And I think, obviously, as I think we all agree, Chris Paul would have been a bigger factor. They went ice cold. I did not realize in my heated Twitter fingers how many open shots were being missed by the Rockets. And I was like, oh, geez. Like, I didn't see that in game time. Like, I was watching, but for them to go almost historically cold. And yes, in the middle of their 27 missed threes, they did have one that was made by Harden, but it was waved off. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know why, but I feel it's important. But just down the stretch, Golden State had the third quarter that they have. And Houston, yes, the calls did not help them, but you just can't miss that many shots. I mean, you can't. And expect to beat the Warriors of any team. It'd be hard-pressed to do that with any NBA team, much less, Golden State. So with that being said, I do think that Chris Paul is a bigger factor than the refs. I've definitely softened my stance. I was heated right after the game. I was all for, not conspiracy, but the refs just giving away calls and letting Golden State have the benefit of the doubt in every play. As far as those 2 James Harden calls that should have been 3 free throws that weren't, and Jordan Bell with the egregious flop. But looking back on it now, no, they did not function as an offensive team should, but as any team should offensively when you're trying to keep the lead over the defending champs at home on a game 7. That's just not how you do that.
So are we talking that Houston should have changed it up once the 3 started to miss? Or are you more saying they just should have stepped up and made the shots and they did?
I mean, at this point, this is where it's fickle because but they weren't getting the benefit of the doubt in calls. And I'm with that. If industry, if you're playing 21 and you're going up there and you're not getting the benefit of the doubt, then you're just going to save your energy and shoot threes. But if you're ice cold from that, then I say at least maybe try to do a different strategy. Maybe bring in, I don't know, personnel, flip-flop some people. Like, they kept the same people out there and they were ice cold. Ariza, his legs understandably were just gone because you're defending Kevin Durant on almost every possession. So I get that. But to go 0 for everything from the field, you just can't do that. They need that offensive production. And with Chris Paul being gone, someone else has to step up. So for me, yeah, I just think someone should have made shots. I wouldn't have minded if Gerald Green was more aggressive on the offensive end. I don't really have a problem how James Harden played. It's kind of hard because PJ Tucker and Trevor Ariza, in their roles, they're not going to give you more than, 12, 15 points on a good night. That's not really what they're there for. They'll hit threes and they'll play defense, and they'll give you those scrappy hustle plays. But I just wish they would have found offense some other way. I don't know where. I would say, just be more aggressive and attack the rack, but we saw what's happening there. And if you're not going to get points there, it would have been the exact same result, just 20 missed shots from the field. You know what I mean? So it's just unfortunate. That's what it is. But the fault is not with the refs, and I realized that maybe the next day. There was obviously some tic-tac calls, but that went both ways, and you got to make your shots. 27 shots, 26, you can't do that. So,
Corban, you're saying that, Chris Paul's probably played a role in all those missed shots as well. So I'll throw this one to TJ. I mean, does this impact how Houston is going to have to approach this offseason? I mean, can they go into next season saying, if Paul had been healthy, we would have won the series, or we would have been right there at the end? Or do they have to look at it and say, Chris Paul's 34, he's going to be 34. He seems to, deal with hamstring injuries at least every other year, or some kind of injury in the postseason. Can we really rely on him to stay healthy through 4 rounds? And, do we need to change our roster around James and Chris, or do we even, how much do we really want to sign Chris to the kind of contract he's going to want? How does this series change your outlook on Houston's offseason?
Daryl Morey has no soul and will have no hard feelings about getting rid of CP3 if that's what he finds fit. But point guards have a really have a long history of steep drop-offs after a certain number of years, and Chris Paul certainly reaching that. His body's clearly breaking down, but when he is on the court, he's still Chris Paul. But what I think you can look at is the Warriors can make a couple moves and still stay win now, because the Warriors run might be ending sooner than any of us realize, with some serious contract situations coming up. So it might behoove the Rockets just to say, screw it, we'll give you a 3-year max and go all in and try and win in these next couple of years.
Cut in here, friend of the program, Justin Carter, asked on YouTube, he said, do you think Houston would be better off going after LeBron or Paul George, since George is younger and could maybe create something that's more sustainable? I think that's an interesting question to sort of follow up on what TJ said there.
Josh, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think going after LeBron or Paul George, Houston's got to create a massive amount of cap space or trade an impossible amount of money to do so. That being said, looking between them, I think there are some situations where Paul George makes more sense over LeBron. Someone like Philadelphia, who truly is a young, up-and-coming team, and they already have a shooting challenge, ball-dominant wing in Ben Simmons. But Houston, I think, is a great spot for a player like LeBron James, who is the best in the league at finding open shooters. And I think that if you put guys like Eric Gordon around him, you constantly are spacing the floor. If you are playing these small lineups, I think that LeBron James is the creator of the pick and roll, drive into the paint, force the big to either drop back so you get the shot, or to step up and you have the perfect alley-oop or the pocket pass. So I think LeBron James does everything that James Harden and Chris Paul were doing on this team better and would fit in perfectly. I think it would be an excellent fit. So in this kind of scenario for a team that's trying to win now, I would say LeBron.
Actually, I think that's the exact problem. Now, but I do think, I mean, if you have a chance to get LeBron James, you get LeBron James. But it's going to be a really serious problem when you have LeBron, the ultimate queen of the chessboard. He is better at doing what your best players are at doing. So you're paying a ridiculous amount of money to these players to kind of stand and wait in the corner for a pass from LeBron. It's kind of like the Kevin Love problem. Kevin Love is way better than what his stats show, but that's usually because they have him standing in a corner waiting for a pass from LeBron. There's also the fact that Bron doesn't really play in a system. He's basically played systemless basketball for the past 4 years. So, I mean, you know, RIP to David Blatt's Princeton offense. So it's I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with Josh that LeBron is such a great fit in Houston, but there's also, I don't know what the alternative is. Is LeBron really a great fit anywhere, or does an organization have to fit to LeBron?
See, so we got into this on Twitter a bit last week, me and behind the guys of the 94 Feet Report account. But no, he announces that it's him out there on the Twitter. But so this is my issue with LeBron James, and he's the best player in the world, hands down. The fact that we almost just accept, like, oh, he's not a good fit there because he's better than these guys at what they do best, and they're going to have to become spot-up shooters. I don't get why the best player in the world forces everyone to become a spot-up shooter. Look, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant are nothing like LeBron James. They're not as good as him at all. They're just not. But they allow each other to be their full versions of themselves with each other. And by doing that, they raise their ceiling in terms of being part of a winning team. That's my biggest criticism of LeBron, is he reduces everybody to a role player. Why couldn't LeBron, and I'll throw this to Corban since I called him out, why couldn't LeBron, first of all, could he do this? Could LeBron go to Houston and actually take a step back and say, I'm going to play more in the post, I'm going to play more off ball, play more like a big, set screens, and obviously still, take over when I need to, but I'm going to let James and Chris still be James and Chris for the good of the team. Why does it have to be everyone fits in around LeBron?
I don't know. Actually, that it would be the latter, in the sense that he would bring the way he plays to the situation. Because that's LeBron. When he wants to play as a roll man on the screen and roll, when he wants to get down there, he always gets the rebounds. But he wants to play as a big an offense, he'll choose to do that. When he wants to initiate up top and control the floor from there, he'll do that. I have no doubt that he can't. I have no doubt that he can function on offense such as Houston with the Chris Paul, with the James Harden. I'm sure that he could fit right in. But I'm not sure if – I mean, it's up to his mindset at this point, and that's my opinion, in the sense that does he want to do that? Obviously, he wants to have a good team around him, but he wants people to play to their roles, and he thinks he's the best decision maker. And I mean, I can't really argue with that. But I almost felt like he and Chris Paul had the same type of personality, and the fact that they had to be in control. And with Chris Paul going to Houston, that sort of changed it. I think that Chris Paul is obviously the dominant personality of those duo there, but he did show they can coexist. So I think maybe this finals will have a lot to do with that, reflection, saying, okay, you know what, listen, this is the best role for me transitioning into my later years. I can still be dominant, but this saves my body, this saves my legs. I don't have to actively take that break on the floor. And that, yes, I can play with two, talented ball handlers and creators. I don't know if you're comparing it to like a big three type deal. I don't think he'll be the Carmelo in the OKC 3 type where he's going to be resistant to his role. But, it's up to him, in my opinion. He can do it, but will he want to is the real question.
Well, I guess you can. LeBron goes to Houston and then brings in his offense, which is just, I'm just going to grab the ball and do whatever I want. So basically, you can kind of look at this series. Do you think the Cavs would do better if they had Chris Paul instead of George Hill, and then if they had James Harden instead of J.R. Smith? It would still work and it would still be incredible. But I think the main issue would be something that Corban alluded to is, those are going to be three strong personalities having a hard time getting along.
I just want to cut in for a second here. This is totally off subject, but J.R. Smith went to the podium, knew what the score was, and then Ty Lue went to the podium and said that J.R. told him he didn't know what the score was. And both of these things happened in the post-game press conference. So the discussion is sort of about whether or not JR really did know. I mean, you could take it for, obviously, one person really doesn't have tremendous incentive to lie, and Tyronn Lue, and then J.R. Smith kind of does. So you can take that for what it's worth. But it's kind of blowing up right now on Twitter, so maybe it's worth sort of circling back to that. I'll leave that up to the show staff, but I thought that was interesting. That's just sort of what's developing at the moment.
Why in the world would LeBron ever leave?
Yeah. On this, and that's that JR saying he's telling the truth when he says he knows what the score was. He just still thinks they were up by 1.
That.
No, guys. So this is JR. As we said, the full tapestry earlier. Alex, did I get any blowback for my just vicious LeBron hatred that I'm spewing right now?
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of hatred. You're not getting a ton of feedback for killing them on YouTube or on Twitter, either one. So I guess you're in the clear for now. I guess we'll see how it goes from there.
Well, I mean, even as a LeBron fan, I can't disagree with anything you said. It doesn't matter because he can drag this bag of potatoes to the finals. I mean, it would just be better if he had Chris Paul and James Harden. But for me, the main problem is the personality fit. But back to JR, who is probably my favorite player in the history of the NBA. You never know what you're going to get. Twitter is pretty lit right now with the memes. There's going to be an iconic image of LeBron just incredulously staring at JR, and JR kind of has the small Kanye shrug, and it's just delightful.
Another thing that's delightful is Sean Livingston just said to ESPN when they asked him about that shot that he's not taking the turnover, and that's why he shot it. They were still playing, no disrespect, but they were just playing the game. But the fact that Sean Livingston's like, in this game, I'm not taking that TO. Like, I'm sorry, that's weird.
Sean came to play. What can I say? Guys, do we have anything else on Houston, or should we move on to Boston?
I mean, what do you guys think as far as Joe Green, just all their wings that are going to be free agents? You know, do you think they're all going to be brought back? If so, on similar deals? I thought that was kind of interesting, and I wanted to hear what you guys' take was on, especially with the way Bamute played after the injury, you know, and how the impact in the playoffs, which could mean something, could mean everything, you know?
I think that Houston kind of hit its ceiling with all these minimum signings. I mean, they got PJ Tucker, one of the best signings of last summer, but then they got Luka Mbamute and Gerald Green at the minimum. And I think those were just huge signings, and they're going to have to hit on those kinds of signings again, because most likely they're not going to be able to keep Gerald Green and Luka Mbamute, maybe not either. Do they keep Trevor Ariza, which is going to propel them into the tax, but then they have no money to bring in someone to replace him? So I think that it's going to be a lot of tension, and you got to see what the Houston owners going to be willing to spend. Nate Duncan made an interesting point that the new owner of the Rockets basically liquidated a lot of his assets and paid cash for Houston, like to buy the Houston Rockets. So he doesn't have the deep pockets that a lot of other owners have, and may not have the stomach for the luxury tax. So I think there's a lot of fascination with what they can do just to maintain where they are, with the recognition that their stars are only going to get older. I don't think James Harden's the kind of guy who's going to age super well. Chris Paul's getting up there. Trevor Ariza's getting up there. PJ Tucker's getting up there. So I think they probably have to run it back, but I don't know that that is the key to unlocking anything.
Josh, why do you think that Harden's not going to with him as like a supercharged Manu Ginobili who's just good? I mean, defensively, it's another story that could become even more of a disaster, but I just feel like that guy's going to be able to get to the line, kind of get buckets. That guy's up forever.
Do you think his conditioning would be a factor? Before we start, like, especially if he gets like an injury or something in later years, because then, you know, if you're not getting those foul calls, yes, his jump shot's going to be what it is, which is he's a very good jump shooter, but all of a sudden, a lot of that dynamic on his offensive game, I think, will be gone. And his body type, to me, is such that he could be James Harden, he could be Sean Kemp 2.0, you know? In my opinion, I'm just throwing out there.
Yeah, I think his body type isn't great for your athleticism, and I think that if he loses that first step even a little bit, I don't see how he gets to the rim. And if he can't get to the rim, then you just, you know, play up tight on him, don't let him get that step back shot, and he's not neutralized. I think he's always going to be an excellent passer. He is going to have those wily instincts, be able to get to the line, but I don't think he can be a superstar. And they're going to need him to be that, because they're going to be paying him like $46 million in his age 33 season. So they're going to need him to be playing at that level. And I don't know if he will. And even if he can sustain it to then, I don't know that he'll be sustaining it past then. And I think he'll be taking steady declines coming up here in a year or two as he starts to get.
Yeah, certainly fair with the conditioning. I mean, he's been a healthy player throughout his career, but so we'll see if that continues. Let's move on to the Boston Celtics before we end here. Boston, you know, it's hard to be mad about how their postseason went. I'm sure it's frustrating for Alex and the other millions of Celtics fans out there that they didn't have Kyrie Irving or Gordon Hayward. Who knows how far they could have gotten. But getting to a Game 7 behind this young core, super encouraging for the future. I think things are a lot less doom and gloom than they are in Houston, certainly. Before we get into their offseason, I do want to ask you guys this question. So the entire postseason was just like a Brad Stevens love fest. We were talking about it. He's always the best coach in the league. He's like, there hasn't been a coach that's come along like this since Pop. You know, Brad Stevens is worth more than like almost any superstar to his franchise. But kind of taking stock now. So Stevens entered this year having kind of a mediocre reputation as a postseason coach. He outcoached Joe Prunty. Corbin's
Playoff
back.
Joe Prunty.
Playoff Joe Prunty, that's right. And he outcoached Brett Brown, who was, essentially a rookie coach in terms of meaningful basketball. Did he outcoach Tyronn Lue? I mean, Ty Lue had LeBron and Stevens didn't, and he almost beat the Cavs. But I do think that that matchup was a lot less one-sided than people are saying. I think there's a lot that Lue did to kind of neutralize some of Stevens' strategies as the series went on. And even if he did outcoach Tyronn Lue, it's Tyronn Lue. So, where are we on Stevens right now? And also, I guess the other side of that, and this will lead us into the offseason, how much of this was just, okay, the Celtics got really hot for a few months, how much of it was Stevens, and how much of it was Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier? Like, these guys are going to be major forces moving forward. This was not just a small sample size thing. Anyone can jump in here. Alex can jump in even. I mean, I need something on this.
Sorry, I was looking at the press conference here. Draymond, always entertaining.
All right, I guess I'll give you twisted my arm here. So here's the thing. Brad Stevens is a fantastic coach, did a great job. The playoff record stuff, you can just take that and do whatever you want to with it. The Celtics have, in the entire tenure of Brad Stevens, the Celtics have been undermatched in almost every playoff matchup because, with the exception of this season, because they just haven't been good. I mean, a lot of those records go back to the first year with Isaiah Thomas, and then the year after that. I mean, there are a lot of teams that, for the most part, shouldn't have really been in the playoffs, and they were, and so the records are bad, whatever. You can throw that out. I don't care about that. One of the most interesting things about this was that, and we talked about this sort of in our Slack and in a couple other places, I was talking to people about it, that the Cavaliers were hunting switches and the Celtics were giving them 2-1 rubs instead of on like good screens, clean screens, and then switches on those screens. The Cavs would just come up and slip the screen and then they would get the switch. And that was something that is particularly later in Game 7, third and fourth quarters of Game 7. Getting those easy switches is what led them to be able to grind out the clock and still be able to convert into points. And, we've talked about it on this program this evening about how that's sort of what LeBron wants to do. He wants to use a lot of the shot clock. He wants to play really slow, and he wants to pick his matchups. And he did it with Baines a couple of times. He did it onto Terry Rozier a couple of times during that third and fourth quarter. And you can sort of think about that however you want to, but the fact of the matter is the Celtics were doing what the Cavs wanted them to do. Now, I don't know how much you can change in game or how much you can re-scheme. And Brad Stevens is far and away a better basketball mind than I am. And so, he sort of, I guess, had run the numbers and felt that it was pretty good to stick with that, even though it clearly wasn't working as well as they'd hoped it would. So I think that that's one of the things you sort of have to look at as you go into the offseason was that wasn't a great look to finish out Game 7. And I don't think that, it's about who outcoached whom or whatever, but I do think that is worth noting because the Celtics shot a lot of three-pointers. They were given a lot of leeway. Rozier, Brown, and Smart, who all had terrible Game 7s, were given a ton of leeway in Brad Stevens' offense instead of just jamming the ball to Tatum. And when you think about those two things in conjunction, maybe it cost you Game 7, maybe it didn't, but ultimately it doesn't really matter as they seem like sort of strategic failings.
Yeah, so looking at the season then, and guys, really anyone on this, whoever has thoughts on it, I think the first place to start is they did this without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. And some people are saying because of that, and I'll just say I think it's ridiculous that they should look to trade these guys because they clearly don't need them. So first of all, is there any validity to that? And secondly, if there is, what would they even be looking for? I mean, by trading like in their prime guys who probably don't have the best trade value coming off injury.
I think it's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense, no backing to it. The fact is they had a very strong season, especially in the wake of those injuries. However, I mean, Tatum, Brown played last year, Rozier's played a little bit, but it was mostly like great play and almost unknown quantity. Like we knew that Tatum was good. We knew they were good. Do we know they were going to be this good? You know what I mean? So fast? No. And in certain games, we saw Rozier in Game 7. We saw Jaylen Brown at times. Tatum was pretty strong without, but he had his moments. They faltered. That's why you have the superstars. That's why you have Kyrie. That's why you have Gordon Hayward. Ideal situation. These young ones will be empowered by the year they just had, the strong postseason. And the next year, they'll get back in their roles and play within themselves. Let the big guns carry and be a strong supporting cast. There will be no trade value for Gordon Hayward or Kyrie Irving, and how would you quantify that coming off the injury they had and also knowing the players that they are? And why the heck would Danny Ainge do that? You know what I mean? Why would Boston do that? The people that are saying that obviously is not us. It makes no sense. I mean, they had their moments where they were faltering down the stretch. What if they had a slow, sluggish start, and now the book is written on them, and then what? No.
If you disagree, tweet at us. Give us your Kyrie fake trade ideas. No, but okay. So we probably all agree on that. So I'll throw this one to TJ. I think the bigger question, smaller question, I guess, but more important question is, how do they handle the role players, right? Marcus Smart hitting restricted free agency, Terry Rozier kind of maybe being a bit superfluous, especially if they bring Smart back. How do the Celtics approach this offseason in terms of if they get their guys healthy and all the assets they have? Do they consolidate? Do they just bring everyone back and go into the tax now? What approach are you taking if you're Danny Ainge here?
There's no real reason to delve too deep into luxury if you don't have to. You just run it back with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward. There's no pressure to make any sort of gigantic move right now. They are as well positioned, standing pat, as anybody in the NBA. They're only going to be better. I just don't see a real reason to do anything dramatic and crazy. Not that Danny Ainge is afraid to.
Yeah, certainly fair. What about the idea, though, of them kind of maybe not consolidating players on their roster, but some of these future assets, along with maybe a Rozier or someone to move up in the draft, get back into this lottery? Is anyone intrigued by that idea?
Doncic, do it for Doncic.
God, can you imagine?
I guess I'll take another stab at it. You guys are really twisting my arms. I hate talking about the Celtics, but
oh my God.
You know what, Corban? You could have talked about the Celtics and then I wouldn't have to, but here we are. One of the interesting things, Simon, is that there are too many guards and not enough guard spots. Even though Smart is a little bit more of a forward and is some sort of weird 6'4" forward hybrid who can also pass the ball. You have Hayward coming back, and Hayward has done a good deal of ball handling in Utah. You have Kyrie Irving. We know what he's capable of. And then Jason Tatum sort of showed down the stretch that he's capable of handling the balls. And then you have Al Horford, who's a playmaker. So you have a lot of situations where Terry Rozier doesn't really fit in. Now, maybe Marcus Smart's that guy that they're going to roll out, but it certainly seems like Rozier, who is a player who played well in extended minutes during the postseason, that seems like the guy that you would really want to sort of move off of. And one of the interesting things that I've heard is that the Celtics are in the market for Mo Bamba, and Bamba has shown a lot of improvement over the offseason. I mean, he apparently withdrew from Texas in like January, February, shortly after the season was over, so I guess early March, and has been in Los Angeles ever since and was working on his body. Friend of the program, Connor Haar, I guess he sort of saw something, and he was talking about it to me in one of our Slack chats about how the shooting was improved, and that was a really big deal. So the Celtics could move up to find an Al Horford replacement, and I think that's an interesting way to go. Now, is Rozier plus the Memphis pick, the Clippers pick, the Sacramento Kings pick, whatever, enough to move up? I don't know. It sort of depends on what a team like Orlando wants to do, but Dallas doesn't want Rozier. They have Dennis Smith Jr. Sacramento doesn't want Rozier because they have De'Aaron Fox. So you sort of got to look at these teams that don't have point guards right now. And maybe Phoenix is one. I highly doubt they're going to trade off number one, but I guess we'll see. And those are the questions that he's like, who would want to move? And I think is a really big question.
And if you're moving up for Mo Bamba, how high up do you have to move? I mean, I don't think you need to. But now, we'll see how the draft unfolds. Certainly a lot of options for Boston on the trade market. Josh, do you have anything else on this? I mean, like TJ laid out, the Celtics are in awesome position right now. They have so much less to worry about. I guess one other question to float out there is, now that Tatum and Brown have elevated their value to a point that I don't think any of us expected it to be at right now, do you consider selling high and taking this opportunity to move maybe less assets to bring in a Kawhi Leonard or an Anthony Davis, if these guys are even available, than you might have had to move a year earlier? Is this an opportune time to strike if that trade presents itself?
I think you should always trade as good as like Jaylen Brown might be playing right now. I think Kawhi Leonard is clearly is like the peak, the ceiling of what Jaylen Brown could be. So if you have the opportunity for a reasonable price to get a guy like Kawhi Leonard, I think you definitely look into that. Obviously, do your due diligence with the medical records, ask around the situation with this Spurs-Leonard Cold War. But if you have that opportunity, I think you do it. But what you don't do is you don't get in a rush to win now that you mortgage the future, whether that's turning in too many assets or including Jason Tatum in the deal, because I think Jason Tatum is special, and he's only going into the second year of what would potentially be 9 years of team control. I think that right now, if you're doing Kawhi Leonard versus Jason Tatum, take into account contract status and how much you're being paid and injury history, I think Tatum is at least an equal asset, if not better. And I don't think there's any way San Antonio would trade Kawhi for Tatum straight up. They'd want Tatum and a pick and this and that. And so I don't think if you're Boston, you can include him. But Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, other pieces, picks, young players, I think that's totally fine. But I think you have to be careful if you're Boston not to get ahead of yourself. Anthony Davis, I don't think there's any way he'd be available, not with the run that New Orleans had into the second round. So I don't think that's an option. So just don't rush it if you're Boston. You don't have to trade Terry Rozier right now. You certainly could. He's got a lot of value. But there's no rush. There's absolutely no reason to rush. And the last time that Boston tried to rush, they tried to trade all their first-round picks for Justice Winslow. So I think it's a lesson that they've got time to be patient. This clock is not running out on them, and that they should just kind of keep riding this upward wave with all the talent that they have.
Wasn't there a bad proposed trade for Frank Kaminsky, or did something like that happen?
So the Boston Celtics had a package of 4 first-round picks that they Orlando, Detroit, Charlotte, and Miami in a row. That was like picks 5, 8, 9, and 10 in the first round of that year, trying desperately to get Justice Winslow. And Charlotte turned them down to draft Frank Kaminsky. So they could have had 4 first-round picks, including the pick that became Jaylen Brown, and instead they got Frank the Tank.
And the rumor is that Riley just laughed and hung up on Danny Ainge when he called to offer that package. So
who's the fool now, right? Man, I hate when Danny Ainge wins. Anyway,
Alex, get back to the Twitter, please.
On it, sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know how much more we have here, guys. Anyone else? Any thoughts on Boston offseason? And anyone tweeting at us right now? It's 1 o'clock. This game pushed us back late, so probably not too many people still with us. But if you are, much respect. What else do we have here, guys?
Nothing much. Jeez, Boston. Regardless, you can we've already said it, but a very strong future with Danny Ainge at the helm and the personnel they have. Jeez Louise, for next year. Would you consider them finals favorites for next year, people? I want to ask that. As far as on the East, and this is off the top right now, as is not knowing where LeBron's going, which makes it a little more spicy.
Yeah. I would pick them. I'm not saying but I think if it's them over any one individual other team, yes, I think they would be favorites to come out of the East.
Even over, yeah, I get you. You're right. I was gonna say with LeBron, then I just said I took that out. So I get you on that.
But I do just want to, like, the Boston offseason, I don't think it is as exciting as teams like Houston or Philly or Cleveland, because they don't have a lot going on. Marcus Smart is a restricted free agent. They can wait that out. Aaron Baines will probably come back for his early bird rights, and there you go. I mean, that's their offseason for now, unless Kawhi Leonard comes available. So I think the real excitement may come next summer.
Yeah, so subtext there. We've spent way too much time talking about the Boston offseason. From the Celtics, we'll get into a lot more offseason stuff coming up. I want to float this out there right now as a teaser, because I guess that's what I do on this show. Me, Josh Corbin, and Lucas Goyne, a new 94 Feet Report writer, are going to be putting out a mock offseason where you'll see a lot of our thoughts on how this thing is coming down. That'll be coming out within the next 2 weeks. We're going to try to get it out depending on how fast the series goes, right after the series or during it if it's a long series. Stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for the draft guide. What version, Alex? What was the version that just dropped today? We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. We did our mock 5.0 last week. Version 1.2 is still out there floating around, and we're getting ready to drop version 2.0 early next week, it looks like. So there's going to be a lot of new stuff in there. It's going to include some entirely new features, so worth keeping an eye on.
And Simon, they would have dropped it today, but with Admiral Patrick's top 10 has to be totally reconfigured. So
that's actually true. That's why we did not drop it today.
Yeah, that explains the confusion. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. A lot of great content coming from the 94 Feet Report. Any last second shots or buzzer beaters here before we sign off, guys?
I do want to say, up and as we're going to sleep, we want to have nice thoughts. I want you to understand that we've all been J.R. Smith at some point in our lives. That we've all done something so inexplicably stupid and how we would want to be treated. We should treat JR that way. We're not going to, because the memes are too good. But we should. That's all I have.
My final thought will be just a quote in the post-game pool reporter group. So here's the transcript. The question: what did Tristan Thompson do to merit the flagrant foul? Brothers, from the angle that I had on the floor, as he is coming toward Livingston, his elbow is up high, and it appears he hits him in the head when he's coming toward him. So that's why I ejected him.
Peak Tony Brothers right there.
He did not come within 2 feet of hitting him in the head. Good times.
What is vision, honestly? What is vision when you're a ref?
It's amazing. It's just amazing, these refs that are still alive throughout this supposed like playoff cauldron of meritocracy, whatever it is. Tony Brothers, I mean, he didn't decide the game. If you do think that was a bad call, the change of the call, I think that was probably more on Ken Mauer. But wow, Brothers found a way to insert himself before it ended. Thanks for watching, guys. There's Corbin's parting words. Just always just complete shock.
I just want to put this in there real quick. If I type the word "fuck" into my phone, the autocorrect goes to Tony Brothers, and I want to show you that it literally says right there. If I type the word "fuck" into my phone, it literally says Tony Brothers. So that should tell you all you need to know about that.
I salute you, bro. Oh my goodness. When I put LeBron, all caps comes up. So I think that shows our separate state of thought, you know? Like how LeBron like a normal person, but just first thing, LeBron.
Alex, wow, that Tony Brothers like single-handedly won Boston a game earlier this season against Houston. You do remember this,
well, guess
right?
what? It was the first one ever. So just consult my phone's autocorrect, Simon.
All right. That'll do it for us. To just make this a PG-13 show at the end there. Does what he does best. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this, you're probably on it. But if not, the 94 Feet Report YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at the 94 Feet Report. Follow me at Simon C. Go. Look for my Game 1 Hoops Habit article tomorrow. And we'll talk to you all next week.
You're watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.